My name is Trent Pettis. I am a special agent with the Department of Veterans Affairs Law Enforcement Training Center, and currently I serve as a division chief for the academics division. In that capacity, we have oversight and training of the Department of Veterans Affairs, approximately 3,700 police officers nationwide. I'm here to talk a little bit this morning about the role of the police as it relates to relationships with other care providers and our interactions in our facilities. To start, it's important to realize that law enforcement has changed. It's evolved over time from the traditional role of officers going out and responding to a situation, a crime, a crisis, affecting an arrest, putting a person in jail, and moving on to the next call. Today we've learned to be intervention experts, or we're trying to be intervention experts, and we really focus on problem solving or community policing as opposed to simply locking somebody up or dealing with a criminal element. We are compliance-based today, meaning we are out there seeking to get compliance from the subject versus simply taking an action. In other words, if a veteran or any other member of society goes out and commits a crime, if you simply deal with that criminal element, make an arrest, put that person in jail, there's a high probability that sooner or later you'll be dealing with that individual again. You're not focusing on the behavior, you're simply focusing on the action. We want to focus on the behaviors. We want to attain that compliance and have a successful outcome. Our goal, again, to obtain compliance from the person, and also as it relates to veterans, we need to be concerned that now more than ever, never before in the history of the United States has our country loved its veterans more than it does today. And they have a different expectation of how we deal with our veterans than, say, 25, 30, 40, or 50 years ago. We have to keep that in mind in our interaction with veterans because society as a whole will not tolerate us as police or anyone else mistreating our veterans. What do we know? What do we know about our veterans today? A few things we know as it relates to our interaction with veterans are they have some social conditioning that have taken place over years. First is our veterans are typically more impulsive. They are taught to be reactive in nature. They're very impulsive. They don't oftentimes have a lot of opportunity to think about what they're doing. They simply go out and act and take care of business. We know that our veterans are tough. They're willing to fight. They're trained to fight. Oftentimes they have more or better training than the general public, and in some cases more or better training than law enforcement, which should be concerned for officers in the field, knowing that they're now going up against a subject who may have more training or skills than you have as an officer. We know that generally speaking, veterans, not all, but some veterans have less respect for police. The traditional roles of authority figures aren't honored in the way that they were in times past. And we also know that veterans know how to use our tactics. They know a lot about how police are trained. They know a lot about our skills, and in many cases, our trainings are compatible. So it's very possible that they have an effective knowledge of how we do our business. So what do we have to do as police officers? First of all, we know that we have to focus on that community policing related model, that problem solving philosophy. We know that we have to stress our verbal de-escalation skills. In other words, try to talk our way out of situations or try to de-escalate situations before they become a problem and we have to react to them. We also know that we have to change our attitudes in our training. We have to focus on this philosophy of gaining compliance versus simply going out and making an arrest or dealing with the symptoms of an issue. And as veterans ourselves, we need to use our veteran experience to help us in that outcome. One thing that's pretty traditional about interacting with veterans is we know that as much as they may or may not respect the police, they certainly respect the fact that some of us or many of us are veterans as well, and we can use that experience to benefit us. It's very important for us to understand that no part of this training, as David had spoke with and Stan had spoke with, no part of this training is designed to take away your ability to act as an officer. This is, everything about police work revolves around officer safety, and we want to make sure that you're always safe in everything that you do. So we break our interactions down with veterans or justice-involved people into high-risk and low-risk situations. And I'm going to define that for you. A high-risk situation is simply what it sounds. If you respond to an event, a call, a situation that's high risk that requires immediate action, you need to act on that as if it were, as if you had no knowledge of what that individual was, whether they were a veteran, whether they had mental conditions, whether they were in a state of crisis or otherwise. Put quite simply, a person with a knife is a person with a knife, and you need to react to that. The last thing you need to do in a high-risk situation is try to evaluate or figure out whether that person is truly serious about what they're trying to do. None of this training is designed for high-risk situations. This is designed for low-risk situations. In a high-risk situation, we expect that you'll resort to your training and do what you've been trained to do. Low-risk situations, on the other hand, are a little different. Low risk means that there may be an opportunity to consider de-escalation as an option, or there may be an opportunity for you to use some of these techniques to guide a veteran towards other options such as healthcare treatment, diversion to a competent healthcare provider or any other provider. That's really what we want to do. That's our ultimate outcome. When we talk about community-based policing or problem-solving policing, that's what we're talking about. Rather than making an arrest, maybe diverting that veteran into some sort of a treatment, care, or therapeutic program that would benefit them in the long run, and hopefully solving that problematic behavior so that it doesn't manifest itself again in further criminal acts. So I want to stress that this is really about low-risk situations. And then lastly, I want to talk a little bit about complementary roles and collaboration with other care providers. One of the challenges we have in law enforcement is working with non-law enforcement people and their lack of understanding about how it is that we as police officers do our job. Typically what happens is other healthcare providers, professionals, or just general providers of any sort, if they don't understand how the police do their job, they will resort back to the training that they know, which may not be compatible with police training. So we need to address our roles and our responsibilities and obligations to work with other care providers in an effort to help people in crisis or veterans in crisis. We do that by understanding our common missions and our complementary roles. I think everybody would understand that police and care providers ultimately have a complementary role, and that we want to benefit that person, that justice-involved person or that veteran in such a way that we can get them out of crisis and back into some sense of normalcy. So how do we do that? The first thing we need to do is we need to share our training and experiences. We need to talk. In times when we're not in crisis, we need to talk about these things to understand what our roles are. Things like use of force issues, things like custody issues, things like search and seizure issues that non-law enforcement people may not understand. Those types of things need to be discussed when we're not in crisis, as opposed to when we're dealing with a person in crisis and we're fighting and we are having opposing roles. We can do that through briefings. We can do that through training sessions. We can do that through after-action briefings, meaning going back after a situation and interacting with the healthcare providers or the other care providers to determine whether or not they understand why we took the role we did, why we took the action we did. We can do that through programs that we have throughout the VA, such as Adopt a Cop programs, where we actually embed an officer into a facility unit, and they help share their experiences. So these roles and collaborations are important to success. And we'll talk about that a great deal through this training. Next, I will turn it over to Robin when we will talk about addressing mental health related behaviors.